So this teleporter here is currently teleporting me as soon as I step on it and I go to the other side. Cool. To just show you up here. Oop. And I go on the other side. Don't mind the portal gun that we're going to get rid of for now. Okay, so let's add a delay to this thing so that I get teleported after some time. And you guys all did this already, but I'm just going to do this for the sake of showing in the recording. To have a delay, you just need to have a third state in between here. I'm going to call it waiting for teleport. And as soon as the player enters the trigger, this state is going to just have a wait of 2 seconds. And when that wait is done, it's going to teleport you then. Okay. So now when I stand on it, it's going to go into that second state and wait there and then teleport me afterwards. Okay. And the problem is that if I leave this state, if I leave the trigger, I want it to not teleport me. And the easiest thing to do is just have another trigger event that when you exit, you're going to fire a transition that says you left. So I'm going to add a new event that says left trigger. And it's going to go here. I'm going to add a transition here, and that one goes back. And that's it. So when you step on it, you wait for 2 seconds, it'll do it. But if I leave, it's gonna stop it and teleport there. Cool. Now if I want a particle system to spawn when I enter, I'm going to create first a particle system in my level. That seems like a good place as any. I'm going to rename this guy to be the, I'm just going to call it an explosion. That's what I'm going to create. Change this instead of being a rate to be a burst. Maybe spawn 300 or so. The shape, I'm going to have it be a sphere, emit from the shell in random directions, and let's just see what it looks. It looks like it's going a little bit slow. I want this thing to be really fast and have a really short lifetime. Maybe too short. And I'm going to have it have cool. Maybe have it have a gravity multiplier of -1 and spawn 500 particles, and maybe I'll just have it emit from everywhere. Cool. And the speed random between 2 constants. So some of these things will move fast and some of these things will move slow. And the size will be also a random between 2 constants of 1 and 5. And color over lifetime, we'll just have it fade out when it hits the end. And the color can be something like blue when it starts. Okay, here's my explosion particle effect. So I want this thing to be a prefab so that I can spawn it when you actually get teleported, right? So I'm going to make a prefab out of it. Here it is. I don't want it in my level, actually. And I'm going to delete it from my level. And in my trigger, when you actually get teleported here, in addition to getting the position and setting the position, we're just going to call create object. And the object I'm going to make is the explosion particle system. And I want to spawn it on the player. So I'm going to say spawn it on the collider. And now when I play, wait 2 seconds, and there's the particle effect that I created. And because I created it as a prefab, oh, that shouldn't be looping. But because I created it as a prefab, and I'm spawning it every time I teleport, it will play every time I teleport to the exit. Cool. Okay. And then I go to BFXR. Random? sounds good. All right. That's what I'm going to play. Save it to my desktop. Sweet. You guys all know the drill, right? It's a favorite tool. There's my explosion. And the reason why I'm calling it explosion is because I'm going to use this also for the projectile that we're about to make. Play sound. And bam. Position's going to be teleport position. Cool. All right. So that's how you make a teleporter, play a sound, play a particle system, and take 2 seconds to teleport. I'm going to show you guys really quickly. Shoot, we don't have time. Next week, I'm going to show you guys how to use the animator because we don't have time to go over the animator and projectiles at the same time. But let's make a gun because we can make a gun right now. And it's really easy. It's a lot easier than you think it would be actually to make a weapon in Unity. And I want a weapon in Unity because your theme is explosion and you kind of need stuff to shoot and things to blow up, okay? So a gun is really nothing more than something that shoots a moving trigger volume. We made a trigger volume that teleports you. A gun will shoot, imagine a flying trigger box that goes through the air, and when it touches something, it destroys it, and it destroys itself, okay? Up to this point, all of our triggers have been stationary, but projectiles are just the same thing. They're just triggers that move through the air, all right? Does that make sense? It's pretty straightforward. It's actually not that complicated. The only difference is that projectiles are told to move when they spawn. So I want everyone to follow along in the 35 minutes that we have left. We're all going to make a weapon. And if we have time, we should have time, we're going to make targets that we can blow up too. Okay? So in this level, or in a new level, make a brand new empty game object. And we're going to make the bullet first. So we're going to call it bullet. I would use the same level that you just made because we need a first-person controller. And it has a teleporter, and if we did our teleporters correctly, these bullets will also teleport through the level. Okay, so make an empty game object called a bullet, and I'm going to give it a mesh. I kind of want it to look like something. Let's shoot vases. I don't know. I think vases sound like a fun thing to shoot. I'm going to put a vase in a level. And I'm going to give it a texture or material as well. And I'm going to actually orient this thing to be like on its back, shooting that way. That kind of looks like a bullet to me. I don't know. Scale it down. Not too much, though. Bullets should be big-ish. So I'm going to take this vase, and I'm going to parent it to my bullet here and reset the position. So there's my bullet. Pew, pew. Everyone have a first-person controller and all that stuff? Okay, cool. So this bullet, the first thing we're going to want it to do is move through the air. So in order for things to move through the air, we're going to use a rigid body component. Rigid bodies allow our projectiles to have gravity. It also allows it to detect collisions and bounce off walls and bounce in an interesting way. So here's our bullet, which looks like this. And I'm going to add a physics rigid body component. You can also type rigid body up here. Just add one of these things. All right. Now, add a Playmaker component to it. A Playmaker Fsm component. And the only thing that this state's going to do is have a single action in its state, which I'm going to rename to be setup. which add just one action called add force. We're going to move it forward in positive z. Okay? So the bullet, which has this Playmaker Fsm on it, is going to move in positive z. I'm going to add like 100 units of force, and that's it. That's all this state has, just one tiny thing. And then play. And actually 100 units is not really enough. It doesn't really move very far. But maybe you do 1,000. Let's do 500 units of force. And also make sure the space of the force is self here. That way it'll always move in forward direction relative to itself. If you want, you can also make it a velocity change. Velocity change will not care about force. But if you make it a velocity change, this thing needs to be something way smaller. Keep it at force for now. We're going to add like 500 units of force and play. And what should happen is that it should fly forward.
Like in an arc and falls to the floor?
Yes. It falls to the floor because it doesn't have a collision component on it, which we're going to add as well. Everyone have this thing flying through the air? It should look something like that, where it goes through the air. If I pause it and play, it'll look a lot clearer. So as soon as I unpause it, it flies. It'll fall through the world, which is fine. All right, let's add some collision to this thing. This vase doesn't have a vase collider. We're not going to use the vase as the collision, though. What I kind of want to do is I just want to add a collision to this bullet itself. So if you go to physics and just add a box collider, you'll get something that looks kind of like that. And if you need to, move the vase so that the box collider is kind of around like that. Make sure you click on the object that you added it to.
It's over here for some reason, and I still can't see it.
Do you have a Rigidbody component added to it? You added a box collider. The size is 0, 0, 0 for some reason on yours. Size should be 1, 1, 1. And then go to where the object is. Double click on the vase. And go back to the bullet. Why is your vase so far away? Click on your vase and then reset the position. You should always reset the position after you parented it. Makes it easier. Cool. Then go to the bullet. There's your box collider. So the box collider, by default, when you shoot it now, it kind of bounces like a box. You can change the size of it so that it is more in line with how the vase collision is by adjusting the size and shape of these things. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just get something that looks reasonable around it so when you fire the projectile, it actually falls through the air. I feel like the bullet's a little slow. I'm going to crank up the force that I add to it to be 1,000. Okay. Does everyone have a bullet going through the air? Ramon, show me what you got. Well, I mean, it'll only go through the air once. Like, it'll only fly when you start. So, like, watch. Does it do this, Ramon, when you play? It should do that.
Mine's not bouncing on the floor. It's still flying through the...
Did you add the box collider to the thing that has a rigid body? There's a rigid body. Box collider. Oh, you marked it as a trigger. Don't mark it as a trigger yet. You don't need it to be a trigger. So, do you have a Playmaker Fsm on it that has this? Do you have an add force action? Show me. But you didn't specify the vectors, so those need to be set up. So change Z.
For 3,000, but if you got it
500 there, or 1,000. Change the space to be self.
Sort of dinky.
Change force mode to be force. All right. I got to finish up this. So once you've added a box collider, and for those of you guys that aren't sure what's going on, make sure you watch this video because it will only help you set it up at home. Setup is adding force, and that's all this state does. Cool. So we have a bullet that shoots out. Nice. Let's make a prefab out of this thing because that's what prefabs are good at. The prefab of this bullet is what we're going to spawn when we shoot our weapon. Once you've made the prefab for the bullet, delete the original bullet that's in the level, and we're going to make a gun that shoots. So create an empty object and rename it to be GO underscore, I'm going to call it weapon. And I am going to parent this weapon to the main camera that's on my first person controller. And then I'm going to zero out its X, Y, and Z. The key here is that you parent it to the camera, zero out X, Y, and Z, and then I want you to pull it forward in front of the camera. Okay? So I have this camera, and I have this weapon that's parented to the camera. It's basically going to be where the bullets spawn from, okay? So all this object is just an empty object that I parented to the camera and reset the position, all right? This weapon, when I click the mouse, I want to spawn one of the bullets that I have, okay? Makes sense? You guys got this weapon attached to your camera, Ramon? Okay, Ramon, watch up here. So I'm going to make an empty game object, right? I'm going to rename it to be weapon. Do that. And then that's it. Okay. So add a Playmaker Fsm to this weapon. And this weapon is going to have two states. One that's going to wait for the player to click the mouse, and another one that says spawn the bullet when that happens. So the first state I'm going to rename to be waiting for, let's just say it's idle. It's not firing. And I'm going to add a second state that says fire. Inside idle, add a single action that says get mouse button down. We want the mouse button that's pressed to fire an event that sets us to fire. Did it lock up?
No, I did that all while I was in play.
I will give everyone this project at the end of class. So even if you don't have it, you can just grab it, just run it at home.
I'm
For those people,
too far.
Okay.
What do you mean by you people?
What do you mean? What do you mean by you people? For you people that lost work for whatever reason, sorry, these computers suck. I don't know what to say other than that.
I wish you just default changed the color
Yeah.
of your screen.
Okay, so the weapon has two states, idle and a fire. Inside idle, I'm going to make an event that says clicked mouse. And when get mouse button down is fired, send that event. And then transition to there, like so. And then fire, when it's done, transitions back. So that's what the state machine looks like right now. Basically, it's a weapon that waits for a mouse button to get fired, goes to the firing state, and then goes back to idle. In the firing state, just like how you created the particle system, we're going to call create object. Create object is responsible for making our bullet. So create object takes a prefab, which we just so happen to have made as the game object. So drag and drop the prefab for the bullet onto the game object here. And the spawn point is going to be the weapon. You could also make it be the camera, I suppose, but I think it works better if it's the weapon. So I drag and drop the bullet to the first field, and then the weapon to the second field. I don't need to do anything else. And then I hit play. And you have this thing that shoots out vases as projectiles. Okay, Johnny's got it.
I'm like sagging for a
Mine's
You're not adding enough force.
Oh, no, no.
mine's going the wrong way.
Make sure that you're.
Shooting sideways.
Oh, it's because your weapon is rotated, or is positioned wrong. Wait, you parented it to the camera.
Yeah, and then I zeroed out.
You pull it forward in Z, not in X.
I don't have anything in X. It's
Oh.
Y. I pulled it down
Oh,
a little
okay.
so it looks.
Show me your create object. Oh, I bet you it's your projectile. Your projectile. Go to your projectile prefab. Go to that setup state that you have right there, that's open right now. It needs to be in positive Z, not X. Yeah, change that from X to be positive Z. Yeah, that'll fix it.
It's shooting in the right direction, but now the face is pointing the wrong way.
Well, you need to rotate your vase then. All right. We got one more thing, which is the actual explosion and the impact with enemies, which I'll do right after I make sure Ramona's good and
Come on,
Mike's good.
land.
What's up? Looks good. Okay, go to your Playmaker state. Go to state.
Oh, come on.
And what's in here? You don't need that.
Teleporting.
That's that. So create object takes two things, right? This is the thing to make. So what thing are you making? Yeah, so put the bullet in there. Where's your prefab for your bullet?
It teleported.
Cool. Drag that in there. Should name it something other than prefab. That's it.
It teleported.
Surprise.
Yay. I'm so excited.
Did it
Go.
teleport the bullets?
Yes. I'm
Does it teleport the bullets?
stockpiling them on the other side.
Okay, let's fix that. Does that work? Shoot, click. Click in there. Does it fire? No, you have to click the mouse button. Yeah.
You have to
Click
like
there.
clicking there.
Yeah. Try that. Click. Oh. Show me your weapon. Sorry, click on your weapon. Oh, you're missing the thing that goes from here to here. So
Where do I
this
go?
state doesn't have any actions in it, right?
Go.
So it'll never transition on this. So you need to add an action here. Don't do it in play mode.
There you go.
Okay, don't make that mistake. Let that shit
Oh,
do
you
it.
can't load
you
up
want
a
the
whole bunch
get
of them
mouse
that
button
only take
down.
the most
I
recent.
had it on the wrong one.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
Over
I
there?
see. That's yeah. Does it tell? Oh wait. So go to your prefab for your bullet. Show me your prefab for your bullet.
It.
And then you need that fire. Yeah.
You
Show
should
me
be
the
able
setup
to
for that
stockpile
guy.
a whole bunch of bullets on here.
That looks good. Are you spawning the right tool? That looks good. Show me your spawn code for the weapon. For firing. bullet, weapon. Okay, looks good.
It's
Show
just
me your rigid body. Sorry, is it just not moving?
yeah, it's not getting pushed.
Oh wait, you have this rigid body on the base. That's why. You need this rigid body on the bullet.
Oh, okay.
So
I think I
just-
had it one on the bullet.
Yeah, delete that guy. You don't need that one on there. Remove component.
They should probably despawn, right?
The bullet. Yeah, we're gonna do that next.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Oh, that's
Oh,
actually
I think that's probably what is it? So try that then. Oh, so now they're going to the right. So you have the same issue. Is your weapon rotated possibly? So go to your weapon. It is rotated, so you don't get to that rotation. Now it'll work.
thank you.
Okay.
Wow. Landed right side up.
And teleported.
Yep.
Oh,
Is it working, Ramon?
kind of dangerous without destroying these objects.
Yeah, we're gonna optimize that next. So we have 15 minutes. We can do this. All right. We need things to shoot.
About bases and not explosions.
Right? So let's make an enemy. And we are going to make it so that these enemies die when the bullet hits them. And I think our bullets should also blow up when they hit an enemy, and they should die automatically after a few seconds, right? Let's have the bullets kill themselves first after a few seconds, because that just is easy. Go to your bullet, go to setup, and I just want you to put a wait here of like 4 seconds. Have it fire the finish transition, and then have it go to a new state that calls destroy self. Okay? So setup has a wait for 4 seconds, just like the teleporter. It's going to fire the finished event and then call destroy self. So a bullet, no matter what, will kill itself after 4 seconds. Okay? Which means now when you fire it, and you fire a whole bunch, things that are older than 4 seconds will automatically destroy themselves. Okay? Simple as can be. The simple wait action here, and it fires a finished event. Okay. Good? All right. Let's us make an enemy that we can blow up. We are going to make the most vicious enemy that's just going to just be a treasure chest. Maybe I can have it be something else. Let's make it look something good. Let's make an empty game object. I'm going to make an empty game object and rename it to be enemy. This is going to be the first of next week's lessons too, which is we're going to do simple AI for this thing. For now, this is basically going to be a stationary target for us. So make an empty game object, call it an enemy. Give it some kind of like, we're going to give it a mesh. What's that?
Make it a cube.
Yeah, we can do that. Let's do that instead. So let's delete the empty game object. Let's make a cube.
What about the third-person controller?
We're not doing third-person controller right now.
Yeah, no, but like make that running guy to be the enemy.
Oh, the running guy. That's a good idea. That guy. We'll make him be a cube for now, because it's just. Yeah. Well, it's not a lot of work. It's just more straightforward if it's just a cube that we can shoot. So I'll show you how to do the running guy next. So this cube, which I put the color sheet on to be multicolored, I'm going to rename this cube to be the enemy. And at this point, I'm also going to go ahead and tag him to be an enemy, because I want my bullets to only blow enemies up. I don't want to blow up teleporters or walls or anything like that, right? So go to the tag list. There's no enemy tag by default. Go ahead and add a new tag called enemy. Just go to the drop-down box for the tags. Click on add tag here, and then just type in enemy in element 0, and you'll get the new tag that you can add. And then tag him as such. And just for shits and giggles, let's have him spin around. just for fun if you want. Just add a Playmaker Fsm to him, and I'm just going to have him rotate around Z and Y, 90 per second.
Menacing death cube.
It's a death cube that just rotates in place.
It's evil.
Right? I'm just going to do that. Just if you want to do that, you can just add a rotate action. If you don't, no big deal. That's our cube. And that's it. That's our enemy. So we are going to have this thing be made into a prefab. So go ahead and make him a prefab. This is why it's important to name your prefabs, by the way, so you know what they are. He's been tagged. Now, we have to do a little bit of work on our bullet. So here's the weird thing about Unity. We want to use a trigger that's moving through the air to detect that this enemy has been hit. I told you that a bullet is nothing more than just a trigger that flies through the air. The issue with Unity is that it already has a box that collides, that bounces into things, that causes it to bounce around. The box is what makes it bounce in the air like that and bounce off walls like that, right? So place a bullet in your level, like drag a prefab and place it. We need a trigger that is going to be hit before the box is. Okay? We have this box collider here, the green thing. And I kind of still want this projectile to bounce. I just want it to bounce and hit guys at the same time. So the trick in Unity is that you basically make a trigger that is slightly bigger than the collision shape is, right? So on your bullet, make a new cube. So just add a new cube, rename this guy to be trigger. And parent that trigger to the bullet. And reset the trigger position so he's right on top of the bullet. Just like a trigger, turn off the mesh renderer. And now, look at the relationship between my trigger, which is the outer green box here, and the inside collision. All right, the trigger on this bullet is huge, which means it'll get hit before the trigger on the bullet gets hit. Right? So there's my trigger volume for the bullet. It's big. It's bigger than the one that's the collider. This trigger is where we're going to detect that someone has entered it, and we're going to blow them up. Okay? Everyone have a trigger attached to their bullet? If you have a trigger attached to your bullet, now add a Playmaker script to the trigger. So click on the trigger and add a Playmaker Fsm to the trigger. So now both the bullet and the trigger have FSMs, but the trigger is going to do a little bit different. It's not going to really do any kind of movement. It's only going to detect whether it hits something or not. So here's the trigger. We are going to make two states. Inside the trigger, the first state is going to be flying through the air, and the second state is going to be hit something. Okay? Flying through the air. It's going to have a single action for a trigger event. And this thing is only going to collide with enemies. So the collide tag here is going to be enemy. Okay. And we're going to create an event called hit enemy. And we're going to add a transition that says we hit something. We also have to store the thing that we hit. Just like the teleporter had a variable to store the person that ran into it, this bullet needs to store a variable for what it hit so we can destroy it too. So we need to make a variable now. It's going to be a game object. And I'm going to call this thing enemy. And that's what you're going to store here inside the collider. And finally, inside hit something, you're going to add 2 destroy object calls. 1, the first one is going to blow up the enemy. So we're going to have the enemy destroyed here. The second one is going to blow up the bullet. So now these bullets, oops, I didn't actually set it up as a trigger. Don't forget to set your trigger up as a trigger, otherwise it won't work, because even I forget that sometimes. And now with my bullets, did I not set up that correctly? Box collider is trigger. Oh yeah, the trigger. Body. Is the enemy tagged correctly? He is. I think the only thing, I'm missing something. Hang on, I want to make sure I didn't forget to add something here. Looks like my trigger. Oh, my prefab doesn't have. Oops.
We didn't save the prefab.
You're right. Yeah, no one called that out either. My mistake. Sorry. Make sure you apply. We're making this change to the prefab instance, but we actually need to add it to the. We have to hit apply so it actually gets applied correctly. What did I change now?
You forgot my Guardians.
What's that?
Not kill that box.
Did you own that box?
Dude, it's never coming back.
I still screwed something up. Is trigger, bullet, there's my box collider, rigid body. Sorry, I need to make sure that all these things are correct. There it goes. Okay, so let me just go over each part to make sure everyone else has this correct. The bullet, we didn't change. The trigger is trigger set and has a state machine that has a trigger event to collide with enemies, and then when it collides, it destroys both the enemy that it hit, which we stored here, and itself. So now that we have this bullet and we have this enemy, we can take this enemy, we just dupe him, like so. And they should all behave the same way. Okay? And if you want, I'll do a little bit extra. Maybe I want these enemies to kind of move up and down, which I can do. Currently, they only rotate, but I can do an I-tween move too. Which will let me move this thing up and down, maybe 5. And let's just do something that is ease and out, like that, and we'll have it ping pong. Oh my god, I may have sent them way too fast. They're moving way too fast. owner, vector position, self, speed, 1. So they are moving ever so slowly, but they're moving to 0, 0, 0, which is not what I want. Let's just do one more thing. Bear with me. I'm going to create a target for this thing to move to. I'm going to raise this guy up. And this thing we're going to have it move to a target instead. And we're going to have each of these things move up and down. Right? So moving objects. Okay. Let me